Good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon, I should say, depending on which geography you are based in. Welcome to one of the second of a series of diversity and inclusion webinars. October is Global Diversity Month, and we're pleased to welcome you to a special discussion on diversity in action. My name is Anthea Collier, and I'm the Asia Pacific Managing Director for Randstad Sourceright, who provide talent acquisition solutions around the world. We are privileged to support many leading organisations within Asia Pacific with talent acquisition strategies. Over the last 7 years, we've seen increased focus on DE&I, or as our American colleagues call it, ED&I, which has different definitions within organisations and is executed in various ways across the breadth of countries within the region. All of us on this call today are committed to addressing social injustice by creating opportunities for employers to access talent that was previously lost to them, and for talented individuals to be welcomed and included for their unique representation, which can only bring strength to organisations and the community around them. We've seen a committed senior leadership focus on improving diversity within the organisational workforce. But the commitment can easily falter when faced with hiring manager desires to hire employees of a similar profile who can quickly deliver on the program of work. The pace and pressure faced by mid-level managers causes tension within organisations. This disconnect between the leadership aspirations and manager reality is causing issues not only at the interview and joiner level, but also with employee engagement, inclusivity, and retention. As an example, we are supporting an organisation who's committed to increasing the number of female leaders, and we've been able to positively impact the number of women hired. But we also see high attrition in the female cohort, which undermines the talent acquisition efforts because the cultural shift has not occurred. The organisation has been unable to reorganise to give space within the working culture to support retention of a diverse slate who might not be immediately productive. And it's really important to recognise that as we're supporting diversity efforts and changing the makeup of the population. Talent acquisition functions and HR must work together to ensure success. Changing the culture of an organisation is never easy, but today we have the opportunity to listen to 4 extremely skilled individuals who each wear their battle scars proudly and who will share their experience and, most importantly, their tactical recommendations to drive change. A few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and a summary of the discussion points will be shared with all the attendees in subsequent days. If you have questions, we'd love to hear them, so please do type them into the chat, and we will reserve time at the tail end for Q&A. We'd also like to recommend that you enable, if you prefer, your closed captioning so that you have a visual representation of the dialogue on your screen, which might make it easier to follow. I'm honoured to introduce our speakers today, joining us from India, Singapore and Hong Kong, and would like to invite each of them to briefly describe themselves to you all. Lynette, can I call upon you for the first introduction, please?
Thanks, Anthea, and thanks, Randstad, for having me on this call. I'm Lynette. I look after employee engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion at Foodpanda across APAC. And of course, with our aim is to create a psychologically safe environment for everyone at Foodpanda. We're across, I think, 11 countries. We've got many nationalities and we speak a lot of languages here. So it's obviously a great topic for me. A little bit about me. I am a bit of a third culture kid. I was born in Australia and I grew up between Oz and Singapore. And I am Sri Lankan by background. So diversity and inclusion for me is really special. Of course, I'm so excited to be getting paid to do something I really love to do. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Lynette. Madhu, can I call upon you for an introduction, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And extremely excited and honored to be a part of this conversation today. So, my name is Madhumita Venkatraman. I go by the pronoun she, her, hers. I identify as a cisgender heterosexual person. I'm a woman with a disability. I have a disability by birth called left hemiplegia. Privileged in terms of my access to education, born in a middle class family, lived in different parts of India, single in my mid 30s. And all of these have sort of influenced who I am in different ways. As I say all of this, in some spaces, an upper caste Hindu Brahmin. So, in a lot of spaces, there is privilege. And in a lot of spaces, I've also seen discrimination, bullying, and things like that for myself, which inspires me to want to do this work, the work that I do. I have led DNI and looked at diversity and inclusion in 3 organizations full time in my career, and also lead an organization, founded an organization called Diversity Dialogues, where we've worked with more than over 100 organizations. And when I mean an organization, to me, it's not just about a corporate organization, it's also an NGO, any place which has people in it, very simply. Right? So, an NGO, an educational institution, and a corporate organization, all of that. And every day is about sort of, I think about how do I make myself more inclusive? How do I become more inclusive? Where am I sort of holding my bias? And all of us have biases, right? So, I'm trying to get more and more aware of that. And for me, this conversation is particularly exciting because I hope through it, I can also address some of the biases that I may hold. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We were chatting before we actually commenced, and we were all sharing with each other that we're learning in this space. We have the right intent and the right focus, but we learn every day. And I think that's very important for all of us to know. We will make mistakes, but if we can focus on how we can learn from that and move forward, remove, as Madhu said, our own unconscious bias, and learn forward, that's a great place for us to be. Prachi, may I turn to you, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here today. And as Madhu was saying, that how the diversity, equity, inclusion role actually teaches us, teaches her more than anyone else. And I have absolutely the same feelings. I'm actually an HR professional for many, many years. I've done HR business partner roles at IBM for various units. But the last 3+ years that I've been in the diversity and inclusion role at IBM, it is changing me as a human being. And every single day, every now and then, I get to learn something new about myself. In fact, I just finished a session for the Asia Pacific region for all the people managers at IBM on unconscious bias. And we were doing various exercises to see that we all have biases, and biases are not all bad, and it's just interesting that every time I facilitate a session like that, there's something new I learn about myself. So apart from work which is diversity and inclusion, I also do mindfulness personally, a practitioner for a few years, and I also facilitate mindfulness workshops at IBM and some other organizations, because I feel there's a very strong connection between being aware, being in the present, being a little stress-free, and then embracing the other. Otherwise, it remains to be a lip service of talking inclusion, but actually being very difficult to work with. So really working on your own self and then helping the other, really putting on your own oxygen mask and then helping the other. So these are few things that I'm learning, practicing, and hoping to be better at it with time. So glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much, Prachi. And finally, moving across to Sudesh. Welcome, Sudesh.
Hi, Anthea. And listening to everybody express themselves. So my name is Sudesh. I'm born Malaysian of Indian origin. Moved to Hong Kong about 15 years ago. Very humble beginnings, humble background. Grew up discriminated. And I lived my entire life being discriminated because of the color of my skin. This lovely shade of brown, whilst many people like to get tanned by the beach, doesn't seem to be very welcome in where I grew up. So when you grow up in that space of where people look at you and they judge you because of what you look like or what you can or cannot do, it is a fate that is seemed to be sealed for many people. So it's either you make it or break it. So and many fail and many break it. For me, I think I took it upon as a challenge. I keep telling everyone the story. You can never choose your parents. You can never choose the color of your skin. You can never choose your gender. You can never choose your sexuality. You can never choose your ability or disability. So why can others choose it for you? So if you have no choice in that, nobody else has the choice to challenge you of what you can or cannot do. So if we have that in mind, this will apply not only to you, to also others around you, to managers and leaders, that this work that we do in D&I is it's a sense of purpose for all of us. I'm sure all of us practitioners here are the same. We got into this role because of a sense of purpose, not because we wanted to do it, because we felt there was a need for it. I'm doing it because I wanted to create a healthy environment for my 2 kids so that they don't grow up to what I went through. So that is my purpose.
Thank you so much, Sudesh. I think as I work and travel through Asia, I'm very aware of the accident of birth and the advantages that that can or give you in terms of opening doors, or in fact may inhibit advantage, as you've just shared. So I think we have to be very aware of our footprint and how we can help bring others on the journey who perhaps are discriminated against by colour of skin or ethnicity. There are so many ways in which, unfortunately, humans discriminate against each other. We're going to open with a question directed to both Prati and Sudesh. Let's begin by framing today's session. We're talking about meaningful action on DE&I. And what does meaningful progress within D&I mean to you, and what does it look like today? Can I go to you first, Prachi?
Sure, absolutely. Lovely question. Thank you very much for that. Meaningful progress on D&I. I'll talk about it from 2 perspectives. One as an IBMer, where actually D&I started 112 years ago. We had the first woman employee in 1899. We had the first person with disability in 1913. So and we had the sexual orientation, identity, equal opportunity policy in 1953. So progress in an environment like that is very different, very, very different, because now at IBM we are actually talking not about how to, let's say, hire more women, but we're talking about how to hire women or other diverse constituents at senior roles, at positions that really matter, decision-making roles, managerial roles. So that is progress. You see a trend that there are more women managers, still not 50-50, but still sort of, the trend is getting better. And we an environment like that, and I'm not just talking about IBM, I'm just talking improvement of D&I or progress of D&I. And people, most importantly, people coming out as allies. I feel that an environment is healthy where we are less worried about people coming out from the LGBTQ plus community, but more concerned with people coming out as allies. And that is what an environment like a matured environment like IBM, where D&I is happening for many, many years, is concerned about. And the last thing I would say, in an environment like that, what matters for us is that leaders take responsibility of hiring, of promoting, of retaining people of all kind of diversity, and their skin is in the game as much as D&I or HR. So we're not seeing D&I as just D&I team or HR's responsibility. Clearly an environment where each employee feels that I am also responsible for making this world, making this company, making this team a little more inclusive, is progress of D&I. Now, that is from a very evolved, perspective.
Ecosystem.
Yeah. And that is not a reality for most most of us. The reality is that we grew up in a systemic bias. As a woman, I mean, Sudesh, when he was talking, I could totally understand that. I may not have faced bias because of those reasons, but many other reasons. Uh, in my country, where I grew up, I'm a woman, brown color, 5 feet nothing, and and faced a lot of bias for various things. And then I decided to not get married. At the time, people think is the right age for marriage. So, uh, and not that those people were bad. Those people were all people who loved me, who had all good intentions. But it really pulls your skin out when you do something which is not in line with what others are doing. And the progress, I would say, is that now things are changing systemically as well. It is at least improved a little uh, from where we were probably 20 years ago. At least from my point of view, the little that I experience life in my own ways. So that is progress. And I think that when each one of us and everyone on the call today, after this conversation or after a training like this, can go back to a dining table conversation at home, and let's say a discriminatory comment is made just casually, and then we can lovingly sort of question that is progress to me. And not just making changes at Randstad or IBM or any company that we come from, but actually making systemic change. That interesting you said that. I'd like to know why you said that. I have done that. I have started doing that in small ways. I come from a very humble background, middle class family. Nobody from the LGBTQ plus community, at least nobody's out or I know of. So my parents would not see it as a very not, very, it was not acceptable. So I've started on dining table conversations in the kitchen, living room. I've started talking about it. And I just feel that is progress when each one of us feels responsible for making this world a little more beautiful.
That is indeed beautiful, Prachi. Thank you. Sudesh, can you share your thoughts?
It was nicely said, Prachi. I mean, we grow up with very little things in our environment, in our space, right? And we're not exposed. And the problem is, the reason why we're not exposed is because those from minority communities don't come out. And they don't come out because of the fear of coming out, the fear of being judged is always there. So we won't know. They may be around you already, but we just don't know. So that's one. When I came out as an LGBT ally a couple of years ago, people thought I was a closeted gay. I was being made fun of. I still remember going up on stage and picking up the Ally Award and coming down, and friends were laughing. Oh, you must be a closet gay for you to win that Ally Award. So when you see, this is the misunderstanding that people have because of perception. And D&I, however we have progressed over the years, there's something that will always pull it down. One, politics and policies. Somebody in some political parties says something and immediately D&I is pulled down, and it no longer becomes a topic of conversation in governments. Religion. Religious leaders always do this. They play the trump card and how to mass the audience. And the conversation on religion always bring up and down the D&I conversations. Third is business progress and business profits. On the good days, on the good years, where companies are making lots of money, D&I becomes a topic on the table. On the years where the company is not doing well, D&I is unheard of and the budgets are the lowest. So how do you sustain work in inclusion work when it is so convoluted in what is happening around the world? So it's very hard for practitioners like us. It gets very tiring sometimes when you feel like you are shouting on top of your lungs, but nobody is listening. So that is why the allyship is extremely important. So it's no longer just you speaking about it, but allies around it. More often than not, DEI becomes a KPI tick in a box exercise for leaders because it looks good on your ESG reports when you're presenting to your financial year-end documents. But if you notice all these annual reports, ESG and DEI is at the very last page. So it's already telling you something. It's telling you something that I'm doing this as a tick in the box because I'll get my scores, my ESG scores from all those rating agencies. I keep it at the back of my page because I want to tell my shareholders about the money I'm making. So when that is already become a challenge for practitioners and for these kind of conversations, that's one. Second is training and learning. So a lot of organizations roll out training programs, unconscious bias like what Prachi is running out, and great stuff. The challenge is you do not become an ally immediately right after attending a training. Remember this. Just by clocking 4 hours of a training program or doing 2 hours of an e-module, you will not become an ally badge. Allyship is a verb. It's an action that you take after that training. Like those conversations that Prachi mentioned when you have with family and friends. That is allyship. That is the actions that you need to take, not a badge after a training program. So we keep doing this until we create an environment that we are psychologically safe, I feel. That you don't have to talk about this anymore, and roles like D&I heads no longer exist. My role, my KPI is to do away with my job and my title. So Manulife doesn't need to have a head of DEI to tell you how to be inclusive. So hopefully it gets there one day. You have to pray.
Hopefully so. And I think that as we look at the demographics around the world and the talent scarcity, it does mean that employers will be forced somewhat to become more creative as they look at the talent population. And that will hopefully help, but it is a definite journey that we have to go on. If I could ask Madhu, what is the biggest shift that you have seen in the DE&I space over the last couple of years, and what do you think are the biggest barriers and challenges that still persist?
Sure. So I will respond to this by sort of stating an experience that I had a few months back. So a friend of mine who identifies as a transgender person shared with me, it was, the month of July. So Pride Month had just about ended. So there were lots of celebrations, lots of events in the company and all of that. And this person was allowed, quote unquote, to declare their pronouns. So their pronouns were declared in the signature, everybody sort of adopted it, all of that happened. Come the month of July, the manager of this individual came to the individual and said, listen, can you just edit out the pronoun? Clients may see it, and it may create a little bit of an issue. Right. And this for me summarizes both what's happening in terms of where the conversation has moved and what the challenge really is. Then we had to go back and sort of talk to the manager, whatever. We had to do a little bit of that work to, educate. But what I'm trying to say is, so the conversation has moved enough that we have dialogues on this. We have dialogues on this in the month of October. We have it in the month of June, in the month of July. Every month there are days, there is something happening, and there are dialogues that are happening on this. And therefore, that's great. It is a movement, undoubtedly. And it's a movement which is more reflective of also the society moving. So if you look at the Me Too movement, if you look at Black Lives Matter, all of these inform what is actually happening, right? And I've only named two, but there are many more that have happened. So there is certainly in India the Rights to Persons with Disabilities Act getting institutionalized, many such things that are happening, which have led to this becoming an important conversation. I've seen leaders and managers being worried before cracking a joke. I've seen, people sort of feeling that little bit of, am I saying the right thing? Am I saying the wrong thing? Which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's good. While I'd like to remove the fear out of the picture and have it more from an education and learning standpoint, with the caveat that all of us make our own mistakes, it's still movement. It certainly is. But the problem with it, and that's the flip side of it, is I do think that diversity, equity, inclusion has become a bit of a fad. It's become a bit of that, it's a great thing. We should talk about it. It's communication, it's branding, it's all of that. And that's one of my reasons for coming into panels as just myself, not associating myself with any institution that I may be associated with otherwise, right? Which is to say, can I remove that layer off? I think, because it is becoming just that. It is becoming a little bit more of, it's aspiring to be a DNI professional. I want to be I want to do DNI work and all of that without recognizing that there's actually a lot of mind space and a lot of bandwidth that this needs. It needs you to introspect every aspect of who you are and what you're doing. So leaders, managers, team members, wanting to engage in that kind of thinking. I don't think that is there as yet. It's a journey, and I acknowledge that. And I'm not sitting on a high this thing and saying that, oh, it's not there, but I'm just sort of stating my own observation of the space. So I think that is one. Tying into it very, very importantly is the fact that, are we investing enough in developing talent? Right. And by that, I mean, for example, if I were to take certain sectors in the country, the manufacturing sector, the number of women in the sector are very limited. So it's not just about saying, I want to hire more women and I'll go out there and I'll find CVs. The talent isn't available. So you will have to invest in building that talent. And let me also say, in alignment with that, you will also have to invest in redefining what merit means to you. And what are you qualifying as merit? Who's defining this merit? Who are the leaders who are calling what merit? That systemic level lens has to be adopted. And I think that is a challenge. That's not happening as much as I'd like to see it. When one says challenge, it's also coming from one's own lenses of what they'd like to see, right? So I think that by itself is a big challenge. The last part that I do want to also call out is that diversity and inclusion is becoming excluding in its own ways, right? And so, in my observation, we started with women and women representation, moved on to LGBTQIA. With India, in India, it was Section 377 sort of being read down. We suddenly said, okay, let's all talk about it. With, disability then becoming also an area of focus. So it's becoming like that. What actually needs to happen is looking at it far more holistically. For example, are we talking about appearance? Are we talking about what that means? And I'm glad today skin color came up, but many other aspects of it. Are we talking about ethnicity? Are we talking about parental status? Are we talking about relationship status? Are we talking about thinking styles, introversion, extroversion, and so on and so forth? Are we talking about tenure in the context of an organization, an old employee versus a new employee? Are we talking about age as much? So I don't think that kind of an holistic intervention is happening. In bits and pockets, it's happening, and that again is associated with the fad a little bit. So those are the different challenges that I see. Please do not ask me what are the answers to solving these challenges. I'd acknowledge and say, I wish I had all the answers. I would have done it by now. I promise you that, but it's a journey. The only thing I'd say is to think about everything that an organization does: business, talent, systems, processes, conversations, dialogues, culture, every bit of it, and try and see if any inclusion lens can be applied to it. And mostly the answer is that it would be there. So, yeah.
Madhu, you raised some really interesting points, and I was fascinated by your comment on exclusion. Within our region, we're setting up an LGBTQ plus ERG, but we had colleagues in Australia who were concerned that that was in fact exclusionary. Our viewpoint was that we wanted to create a safe place for dialogue and discussion and to provide a voice, but it was an interesting perspective that I hadn't considered before.
Yes.
So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
And that's where the whole thing about allyship comes up, right? And I can see in the chat a conversation about age that has popped up, and I do want to sort of, fit age into the conversation, right? And how I would fit it is this: think about it. I'm going to take the example of LGBTQ that you just spoke about. LGBTQ is being seen, I have to say, as a 26-year-old gay man wanting to come out. That's generally the narrative that's being used, right? Whereas we need to realize that LGBTQ is also a bisexual person who is at the age of 50, closeted, and who may have lost their partner due to the pandemic. That's also a story which is LGBTQ inclusion, right? And therefore, somewhere in putting on that millennial lens, and putting on a gender lens, there is exclusion that ends up happening. How many of us talk about menopause at the workplace?
I have, because I've been through it. It's not fun.
Thank you, Anthea. a conversation that rarely I've seen happening. Why? Because the conversation's all about, maternity and, oh, women drop off at maternity. With no means am I trying to say that that's a lesser conversation. Let me put that out. But when you look at a segment, you need to look at all angles. Women with disabilities, single women, women going through menopause, women going through menstruation, and it needs to be holistic in that sense, right? So I think that's what I mean by, looking at it in a more holistic manner. Right. So caregiving, for example, and I think again somebody has mentioned that point. We often look at it as parenting, but not caregiving. There is so much of caregiving that's happening. There's so much of mental health that's happening. There are women, people going through domestic violence. Again, something to consider.
Yes.
So I'm sort of only trying to bring in these points to get to what you're saying. It becomes exclusionary because we're not able to see it holistically. And by we, I'm very much including myself in the whole space as well.
Thank you. That's been really stimulating, certainly to my thought process. I'm going to come now to Lynette. And I'm just pondering what you've been saying there, Madhu, because the next question that we wanted to pose to Lynette and Prachi was, how do you incorporate DE&I into your talent selection and career progression processes for building diverse teams? And I'm thinking, obviously, in my landscape, I'm very much about talent acquisition and the entry point. But equally, I had a conversation this morning. We were talking about the importance of identifying the skills that are going to be eliminated due to automation. And does an organization actually know the adjacent skills and how they're going to upskill and reskill? So if we think that through the lens of diversity, could you share your thoughts there, please, Lynette?
Sure. So I think for us, and for me personally as well, diversity, at least at Food Panda, I think in terms of gender, where, across Asia, we're 50-50 or nearly, and what we want to do obviously is to upskill women, particularly to become leaders, and also upskill the general population, So for example, I know this is a huge problem everywhere is tech talent, there's a war for talent, as they always like to say. And so for us, it's all about bringing tools in and trying to educate as well. So we recently launched a tech academy in collaboration with the government as well. So we're trying to educate people who are trying to change careers into tech, or young students trying to get into tech. And so in that sense, we can create a bit more diversity. And then I think that to go back to that age question, that's how you also attract diversity of age, right? Because there's a lot of women or men even at later stages in their career trying to move into new industries, and how do we make that accessible to them as well? And then for us, I think the other thing with the D&I lens, we use tools, obviously when we're hiring, that help us reduce the bias when it comes to hiring. So you can sort of blind CVs, so you can't see names, you basically hiring on skill, right? So for us, a big, and I love this, and it's a big driver, is to bring in diversity of thought, right? So more than anything, everybody has diverse experiences, and we want them to bring those experiences and those backgrounds into the workforce, and to give us a lot more diversity in that sense, which I think is it's hugely important for success.
100% agree. Thank you, Lynette. Prachi, your thoughts?
I think, Anthea, again, it's a journey. You can IBM, for example, has all the policies, programs to hire right, to hire diverse, to hire inclusive. We have the right kind of training programs. It's a journey, because at the end of the day, you can have all the policies, programs, technology. In the case of IBM, for example, we don't ask people where they come from, what their caste, religion is. We absolutely don't keep any information about their background at all. I mean, except probably the gender also comes in, because it's a statutory requirement in some of the countries that we operate from, and that too after the person is hired. So absolutely no information at the beginning. But can I say that it's completely foolproof inclusive hiring? No, because at some stage you're meeting people, or you're talking to people, and the moment people interact, the human bias comes in, to play, and therefore making people aware. And I'll really say it again, awareness is the most important, the solid foundation, and especially when it comes to hiring managers who are actually taking the most important decisions here, that am I if you bring that awareness to them, that am I really hiring this person because this person is a little bit like me or a lot like me, same background, same gender, same age, same this and that, and it's not conscious, it's not something that I'm a bad human being again, it's happening totally unconscious. And therefore training people, equipping people with the tool of self-awareness is so very important, along with technology. It's really augmented technology, used with human intelligence, human heart, emotional intelligence, which will work. Alone, technology fails, because at the end of the day, AI is trained by us. So we will
Yeah.
train AI with all our biases, and it's absolutely so very important. Talent acquisition, I think we don't have targets. For example, we don't earmark roles. We don't say that for this role you will only hire a person with disability, or you will only hire a woman. We never say that. However, we make sure that people are trained, people are on a journey of inclusion, and therefore we don't push inclusion down the throats of people, that you better start being inclusive from tomorrow, uh, uh, or today afternoon you start being inclusive, because then that, we've realized over time that long term, that actually a lot of hate emerges when you push inclusion down the throats of people. However, if we bring awareness to people on how it is benefiting me, you, and us together, as a country, as a community, as a family, as a company, as a team, then I start taking action on my own. When I feel responsible on my own, then hiring happens, then talent acquisition happens, and I don't have to force it. I don't have to earmark roles. I don't have to say, 10 people hired, no woman, no LGBTQ plus person, no person with disability. Or if they are being hired, they're only being hired at the mid-level. Which is the company today where you can say that you have a great number of women or LGBTQ plus people at the junior and senior and mid-level, and also at the senior level? No company, no IBM, no Randstad, and no other company. We all are struggling with the people, women tapering down the moment after like mid-level. We all are struggling there because there's so much systemic bias, because at the end of the day we still feel that women are the primary caretakers and they are fully responsible, and they themselves feel that, and they themselves feel guilty because we've been trained like that, of taking care of our careers. So all of this happens with time. So in both ways, companies, corporates are playing such a major role in changing that, in transforming that. It'll take time. However, it's really important that we start training the next generation, our daughters, for example, our children basically, that career is a part of your identity like anything else. The day I start telling my daughter that, then I've done my job, while corporates are doing their job, while the government is doing their job. I do my job as a parent or as a friend or as a partner, that you are studying today because you need to fend for yourself, you need to be financially independent, you need to be creative and innovative in what you're doing. Then we are really holistic. And I'm not talking just a company, because that is just very lopsided. Companies are doing great stuff. Look at Randstad doing this webinar, this panel discussion today. The day I start training my daughter, saying that you go to the gym not to lose weight but to gain strength,
Yes.
that is when I
Yeah.
do part of the work.
I'm
And
going
then
to break, Prachi, I really appreciate what you're saying here. I'm going to break the flow a little, and I'm going to go to Sudesh. Sudesh, I've seen a wonderful visual, which probably everybody has, about equality. And you see the three little figures looking over a fence. But in order for them to have the same view of the landscape, some of them are standing on boxes. in order to be able to have the visual clearance over that fence. Do you think, Sudesh, that in order for us to welcome and support diversity, that hiring managers should be given some degree of relief from their productivity objectives in order to be able to provide time for the individuals to assimilate and the ramp to productivity? Do you think that it's appropriate that those individuals are given additional coaching support to help them assimilate on that path to productivity? Can you share your viewpoint?
Absolutely. It's all about equity, isn't it? When we know that everybody
Yes.
has a different starting point, and when
Yes.
you acknowledge that everyone has a different starting point, and you as a corporate or as a leader do whatever it takes to bring everybody to that equal standing, then you apply merit. When you apply merit at the very beginning, when everybody has a different standing point, then you start seeing the same type of people who look the same, talk the same, take up leadership roles. So the others who are minority, women, color, disability are often ignored and forgotten because they were not supported throughout the way. So at least from that is why I feel practitioners like us use the power of our brand, the brand behind us, to push things forward, because the brand has money, has impact, has reach. And if we alone, sometimes our voice is not enough in a community, we use the might of the brand to push things out and to make it work. So it's a couple of examples for disability hiring, for example, Anthea. So we are pushing towards a disability hiring across the company. There's a KPI target of 1% hiring of people with disabilities across all countries in Asia. And that is in everybody leaders KPI. And we've been actively pushing and hiring towards it. And which is great. And not only that, we are also offering bursary funds. Bursary funds for up to a number of employees, where it's fully funded for 3 years, people with disabilities. So managers now don't have to complain, I don't have the budget to hire another headcount. You normally get that. If you have a headcount of 3, you have a productivity target, you want to ensure that you hire the able-bodied person to be able to drive all those things. And if you ask the manager, can you please hire somebody who may be able to only deliver 70% of their efficiency? I'm not sure. Then what about my other 30%?
Mm.
So what now if we give you a bursary fund, free headcount, paid for 3 years, what would you do? So, and that seems to be working and is buying into action. So that's one, where you put KPIs and drive downwards. Next is you do partnerships. We do a lot of partnerships. Okay, the power of DEI is, DEI, unfortunately, is the biggest strategy pillar in every organization. IBM, Food Panda, any other company, if you see, it is in the pillar, it is in the CEO's messaging, everybody talks about it, but it has got the smallest budget in the company. Everybody is just smiling because that is true. It has got the smallest budget in the company. So you have to be extremely creative. So how we can do it is partner with other companies. So in our recent, we did an internship program where we partnered with Hyatt Group Internationals and Herbert Smith Freehills to offer a very specific internship program for diverse and minority candidates in local universities in Hong Kong, where we give them opportunities to intern with these top-tier companies, where normally they never get an opportunity to walk in. That exposure was so amazing, where they spent 1 week in every company for the whole month, exposed to the CEOs, the leaders, the work that you do. And that exposure was so precious to them. And the quality of these interns was so amazing. At a normal situation, you will never see them. You'll never notice them. But these are with disabilities, with different colors, or the sexual orientation. The quality was so good, the 3 CEOs at the final presentation offered jobs immediately without interviews to all 8 candidates. The moment they graduate, they have a permanent job ready at these 3 companies. Now, this is the value that we see, that we start bringing talent up front and show, bypassing all these things. And honestly, I'm putting a plug over here. I'm encouraging all companies who are watching in. If you are keen to participate in this program, reach out to me. You know, we are taking this across Asia. So we are now matured in Hong Kong. We are launching in Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Japan. So if you're keen to join, no cost. It is just doing the right thing for the community. So I think this is something that more and more corporates should partner and do things together, because you cannot do it singly. And that's what Prachi mentioned. Is that you cannot do this alone. is everybody has to do this.
I know for sure we would definitely love to participate. So thank you for that. I'm really keen to get some practical applications of what we can do in each of the companies that are joining this call, and as individuals, to the point that we all need to take this message and to take the actions as we move forward to positively impact the community around us. Lynette, can you share practical applications of diversity that is in place and inclusion and equity that is in place within Food Panda, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of the things that we're still, obviously, we've started with this, we have a long way to go. But I think, like Sudesh mentioned, obviously we have a keen focus on improving a lot of our policy, our attraction to people with disabilities and students with disabilities. So we have, I think, totally agree with Sudesh, partnerships are very important here. We've partnered with a couple of organizations where we've gotten students with disabilities to come in and work on business challenges and come up with solutions. And, it's really been mind-blowing. And I think not just for us, but I think the expectations of the team who are mentoring them, I think were also sort of blown. Our product and tech team, and similar to Sudesh, what he said, right? They were just like, "Can we hire them now after the project?" But it was great because because I think going in they were a bit nervous because they're like, "Oh, they've got like, how do I work with them?" But coming out, they was like, "Oh, they're normal." So I definitely encourage everybody also to, look into ways you can bring some of these people with disabilities who are great, absolutely wonderful talent, and then again, on the other end, look into your policies. We've updated a lot of our policies to make it very inclusive for different people. So even for, say, the LGBTQ plus community, a lot of our policies are extended to people who, like cohabiting partners, for example, when it comes to family care leave or medical insurance, adoption leave, for example, or adoption, policies. And actually, even when we're looking at even cohabiting partners, we also realize so many young people now are not getting, and we're also a very young office. So we also realize a lot of our employees are not getting married very young anymore, but they're living together, right? And they consider this is my partner. And so how are we looking after that as well? So I think a lot of it's also changing our policies to kind of keep up with the times. And making sure everyone feels included.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're on the run down to the close, but I'm keen to ask Madhu and Prachi, if you could share in 4 minutes the practical applications that you would recommend to our listeners. Madhu, would you like to start?
Sure, happy to. I think I'd go back to, in addition to whatever is being said, I think I'd go back to sort of asking each individual to redefine merit. Okay, and I'll give you a small example to be able to substantiate what I'm saying. In one of the organizations that I was working with, we tried to build in a factory with about adequate 50% women representation, right? And in the process of that work, one of the qualifiers for getting into the factory and to be an operator in the factory was having certification, in India and being a graduate. Right. And one of the things that, we worked towards was to just re-examine that definition. Why is it necessary to have a graduate to be able to do the role of an operator in a factory, which is an automated factory? Right. Why can't somebody who's a 12th standard pass do that job? What stops them? Right. And I think it was an important thing because the leaders had a shift in mindset. We ended up sort of doing what we intended to do, and the factory continues to exist. And if I can say there's one more factory of a similar nature and kind the organizations looked at, it sort of decided to do that across factories, across organizations, and so on. And, the example I'm stating is in addition to talent, processes, systems, culture, which is the second pillar and an important pillar, and looking at talent both from a development and hiring angle, for each of us to be able to question that, I think is important. So that's one. The second, in addition to that, which I would just sort of say is three things as an individual that you can do. One, can you ask and not assume? Can you not assume what a visually impaired person can do? Can you not assume what a woman on maternity can do? Can you not assume what a transgender person can do? But can you ask, even in the hiring process, the selection process, once the person joins the organization, is that something that you can really do? The second ask I'd say is breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Can you have that with somebody who is different from you? Right? Who's somebody you're actually a little bit uncomfortable with? Can you take that little risk as an individual and go ahead and do that and see what that experience feels like? Because I feel we don't expose ourselves enough beyond the circuit that we're used to, right? And to be able to do that is a change that I hope to see. The third thing is not to fear diversity, equity, inclusion, feminist, ableist, casteist, all those things, those conversations, not to fear it, but to know that you can always say sorry. And the other person's watching out for intent. They're not watching for verbiage. Right. So if you misgender me today, though I've said I'm she, her, hers, I'd be like, no, please, you've got me wrong. And after that, as long as you maintain it and don't do it on a repeated basis, I'd understand that. Right. So to understand, sorry, thank you, and of course, I don't mean unnecessarily apologize, are words that can be used, and you don't have to therefore approach this whole thing with a fear, because that's stopping a lot of us from openly having a dialogue on this subject. So that's one recommendation on the business side, but three personally, because I really believe that will make the change. Over to you, Prachi.
One recommendation, in addition to what Madhu said, that train yourself and speak up at the right time is really important. Thinking later on, oh, that person shouldn't have said it, it's no good. Speak up at the right time, and that's where awareness would help. This is as an individual we can do. If you're in a decision making role, make your leaders responsible, let them have their skin in the game. And being externally eminent is really, really important. This is my second and the last point for people who are in decision making roles. Speak up, speak publicly, and make sure Randstad communications is okay with that, and whatever, in that sort of framework, but speak up internally and externally. As a company leader, it's really important to mentor, sponsor others as well. Back to you, Anthea.
Thank you. Beautifully expressed. Okay, I'm getting my instructions from Melanie, who's timekeeping beautifully. So I think we have 6 minutes left, and I'd love to encourage questions. And I think we do have one here from Melanie herself. How do you strengthen leadership and business so they have skin in the game? Who would like to take that?
Since I made that comment, I can take a dig at it. How we've done it is, one is, of course, we train our leaders to ensure they know it's a human and a business imperative. You cannot make wiser solutions for the client unless you're creative, innovative. You cannot be really creative and innovative if you're not diverse. And that also, and that is, we have that understanding that working in a diverse team is actually more difficult if you're not inclusive. So working in a homogeneous team is much easier, generally speaking. But if you're more aware, if you're more inclusive as a team, then it's really intelligent for the client as well to be more innovative and creative. That is one. Another is that we make sure that our senior most executives have it in their performance appraisal. We call it checkpoint. So you don't just talk, you make sure their incentives are linked to inclusion and diversity. You don't just talk, you make sure that they get paid or not paid, depending on how diverse, inclusive, and equitable they are. Their skin will be in the game.
One of the things I would note, and thank you for that, Prachi, is that I have seen and worked with organisations that do have that in the bonus appraisal for their senior executives. Where the gap happens is the mid-level. Because from their perspective, they're just simply about performing the tasks and they want to do it as fast as possible because they're typically understaffed. So I think it actually has to have a flow down in order for the organisation to work together as one.
Yes, absolutely, Anthea. And for that, we for example, have a engagement survey. Each manager, doesn't matter what level, mid-level, lower level, senior level, we all get inclusion scores. So you always know which manager is more inclusive than the other, which manager needs more work, or which team needs more work.
I'm going to ask you to share a pithy piece of advice to D&I practitioners on this call who are struggling within their company environment to get the voice, to get the recognition. As Sudesh said, move from the back end of the annual report to at least the middle. Can I perhaps start with you, Sudesh, a pithy commentary of advice to help those practitioners?
So what we did in at Manulife at least is to show them that DEI can actually make money. It does. It does. We have always been selling to the same group of people all the time. The same people who look the same, talk the same, has the same amount of money. But how much can you sell to the same group of people? There are a lot of other communities that we have not touched, underrepresented and underinsured or uninsured. Now show them this. This is what is available. Has 1.4 trillion US dollars sitting in the pockets of the LGBT community in Hong Kong. 4.3 US trillion dollars in Asia alone. Look at the amount of money. Extremely loyal people. You sell them a product, they'll come to you and they'll stay with you for life. So this is the thing, we always ignore and we think that it is not the right thing to do, but we have to keep pushing it. Show them the money, show them where the money is. And it seems to be flowing in the right direction.
Excellent. And you know those numbers beautifully. Who would like to, we've got 2 minutes left, so who would like to share their thought that would help others?
So I'd like to share. I think my observation has been that you need to be able to celebrate small wins. And celebrate that as a DEI practitioner as well. Because sometimes it is a long journey. If equity were to happen, the world would have been a different place today. It's existed for centuries. So every small thing that you do, learn to celebrate it and learn to take care of yourself, because it is a hard journey, irrespective. So that would be, in fact, my advice. The other point that I did want to make, and I'm going to go ahead and make it irrespective of time, is on the leadership bit. I think what has really helped me has been to help leaders explore which aspects of diversity and inclusion are they passionate about. And what you would find is every leader has also experienced discrimination in their own lives. So there is an area that they'd be passionate about. And if I look at companies which have done this work really well, if you look at SAP Labs with Autism at Work, if you look at Godrej with the LGBTQIA inclusion piece, there's been one leader who's come in and said, I will put my reality behind this, my force behind this, and that's usually tied into their own personal journeys and lives. So being able to find that leader, even for an initial D&I practitioner, is useful, where you can see what is it that encourages them, what are they passionate about when it comes to DEI. So those are two pieces.
Thank you. And that has taken us out beautifully to the close. I really want to thank our amazing panel. I think everybody who is listening will agree that there's such a breadth of experience here. And it really gives me hope in humanity. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your battle scars. We will send out a summary based on what we have learned here to help equip everybody for their own personal impact journeys. But thank you so much. We are absolutely honoured to have spent time with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.